The thunderous crash of a heavy oak door slamming shut echoed through the Georgetown Sheriff's office, as Rose Reynolds found herself thrust into a cramped jail cell, the iron bars clanging shut with brutal finality. It was 1874 in Colorado Territory, and Rose's defiant green eyes glared at Sheriff Wilkins, a man whose badge seemed to give him unlimited power in this dusty frontier town. "This is outrageous," Rose protested, her knuckles white as she gripped the cold iron bars. "You have no right to lock me up." "I've done nothing wrong," Sheriff Wilkins merely sneered, adjusting his gun belt with practiced nonchalance. "Got reports of a woman matching your description causing trouble at the saloon. Suspicious character, new in town with no husband or family to speak for her." "That's cause enough in Georgetown." "That's ridiculous. I arrived yesterday to claim my uncle's property. I have documents." "Documents can be forged, Miss Reynolds," Wilkins interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Besides, that land your uncle supposedly left you, mighty interesting piece of property, sits right where the railroad's looking to expand." Rose felt her blood run cold. The sudden understanding of her situation crashed over her like icy water. This wasn't about law and order. This was about her land and the powerful men who wanted it. The sheriff tipped his hat mockingly. "You just sit tight. Judge comes through in about 2 weeks. Maybe he'll believe your story." With that, he turned and sauntered out, leaving Rose alone in the dimly lit jailhouse. 2 weeks. Rose sank onto the hard wooden bench that served as both seat and bed. 2 weeks locked in this cage would be enough time for whatever scheme they had planned. Her uncle's property would be stolen from her before she even had a chance to see it. The sun had begun its descent when the jailhouse door creaked open. Rose expected the sheriff returning to gloat, but instead, a tall figure silhouetted against the dying light stepped inside. As he moved from the doorway, features emerged from shadow. A weathered face bronzed by years under the open sky, eyes clear and blue as a mountain lake, and a quiet confidence that seemed to fill the room. "Sheriff's not here," Rose said coldly, assuming the man was looking for Wilkins. The stranger's eyes assessed the situation quickly, taking in her fine if travel-worn dress and the unwarranted imprisonment. "My name's Jack Yates," he said, his voice low and steady. "Folks call me Jack, and it seems to me a lady like yourself doesn't belong behind bars." "The sheriff disagrees," Rose replied bitterly. "Apparently being a woman alone is crime enough in Georgetown." Jack moved closer to her cell, his spurs jangling softly with each step. "What's the real reason?" Rose hesitated, unsure whether to trust this stranger. But something in his direct gaze compelled honesty. "My uncle, Henry Reynolds, died last month. He left me his land 100 acres north of town. I came to claim it, but it seems someone else has plans for that property." Understanding flickered across Jack's face. "The railroad," he murmured. "You know about this." "Been watching the situation for some time," Jack admitted. "Your uncle was a good man, refused to sell when everyone else was caving to pressure." Rose felt a surge of pride for the uncle she'd barely known. And now they think they can steal it from his niece. Jack's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the window, noting the deepening twilight. "How long are they holding you?" "Until the judge arrives." 2 weeks, the sheriff said. Jack removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair streaked with gold from the sun. His expression had hardened into determination. 2 weeks is plenty of time for them to manufacture charges, forge documents, or worse. "I know," Rose whispered, the gravity of her situation settling heavily upon her shoulders. Jack stepped closer to the bars, his voice dropping. "Listen carefully. I'll be back tonight. Don't make any trouble, don't give them any reason to move you." "What are you planning?" Rose asked, hope flickering dangerously in her chest. Jack's eyes met hers with unwavering resolve. "You're locked in the sheriff's cell without cause." He reached out, his calloused fingers briefly touching her hand through the bars. "Then I'll break the bars." The simple statement, delivered with quiet certainty, made Rose's heart skip a beat. "You can't risk yourself for a stranger." "Your uncle saved my life once," Jack said, settling his hat back on his head. "Besides, I've never been one to stand by while injustice plays out." He backed toward the door. "Be ready at midnight, and Miss Reynolds?" "Yes. This town has forgotten what justice means." Perhaps it's time they remembered. After Jack left, Rose paced her small cell, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. She had arrived in Georgetown with such hope, ready to start a new chapter after years of working as a schoolteacher in Boston. Her uncle's letter had offered not just land, but freedom, a chance to build something of her own far from the suffocating expectations of Eastern society. Now she was trapped, her future hanging by a thread, dependent on a mysterious cowboy she'd just met. Yet something about Jack Yates inspired confidence. There was a steadiness to him, a moral certainty that seemed rare in this wild frontier town. As promised, at the stroke of midnight, Rose heard a soft scraping at the jailhouse's back window. Moments later, Jack slipped inside like a shadow, moving with surprising stealth for a man his size. "Sheriff's at the saloon," he whispered. "Drinking heavily. We have maybe 20 minutes." He produced an odd-looking tool and set to work on her cell door. "Stand back," he instructed. Rose watched in amazement as he manipulated the lock with expert precision. "Where did you learn to do that?" she whispered. A ghost of a smile crossed Jack's face. "Spent some time with a locksmith in Santa Fe. Man had interesting stories about the less honorable applications of his craft." The lock clicked open and Jack swung the door wide. "Come on. I've got horses waiting behind the mercantile." Rose hesitated only a moment before gathering her skirts and stepping through the opening. Freedom beckoned, but she knew that once she left this cell, there would be no turning back. She would be a fugitive. "My belongings already secured them from the hotel," Jack assured her. "Your valise is with the horses." They moved silently through the dark streets of Georgetown, keeping to the shadows. The town was relatively quiet, with most activity centered around the saloon where raucous laughter and piano music spilled into the night. True to his word, 2 horses waited in the alley behind the mercantile, Jack's sturdy buckskin gelding and a smaller chestnut mare for Rose. "Can you ride astride?" Jack asked, eyeing her dress. Rose nodded. "My father believed all proper young ladies should know how to ride properly, not just perch sideways on a saddle." "Good. We've got ground to cover before dawn." As they mounted, Rose noticed Jack was dressed for a journey with saddlebags packed and a rifle in his scabbard. "You've planned this well." "Had to," Jack replied grimly. "Once they discover you're gone, they'll come looking, and they won't be gentle about it." They rode north out of town, keeping a steady pace through the night. The moon was nearly full, casting enough light to navigate the rugged terrain without torches that might give away their position. Rose found the chestnut mare responsive and sure-footed, clearly well-trained. When they'd put several miles between themselves and Georgetown, Jack finally slowed their pace. "We're headed to your uncle's land," he explained. "It's the last place they'll look, and you have a right to see it." "How do you know where it is?" Rose asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Worked with your uncle last summer, helping him clear some land for planting. He spoke of you often, his niece back east with more spirit than sense," he'd say, with a proud smile. Rose felt a pang of grief. She'd only met Uncle Henry twice, during his rare visits to Boston, but they'd maintained a correspondence over the years. "I wish I'd known him better. He was a good man, honest, stubborn as the day is long. Jack's voice held genuine affection. When I heard he'd passed and left his claim to a niece, I kept an ear out for your arrival. Georgetown's been changing and not for the better. What happened to the town? Rose asked as they navigated a rocky slope. Jack's expression darkened. Money happened. The silver mines brought wealth, and wealth brought men who'd do anything to get more of it. Sheriff Wilkins used to be a decent lawman, but now he's in the pocket of the railroad investors and mining companies. He glanced at her. Your uncle's land is strategically valuable, sits at a pass that would save the railroad miles of track if they could run through it. And they thought a woman alone would be easy to intimidate or frame. Exactly. Jack guided them around a stand of pines. Up ahead about a mile is your property line. By daybreak, you'll see what your uncle built. They rode in companionable silence, and Rose found herself studying her rescuer in the moonlight. Jack Yates carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. He wasn't overly talkative, but his words held weight when he spoke. Despite the circumstances, Rose felt safe in his company, a surprising realization for a woman who had prided herself on independence. As promised, they reached Henry Reynolds' homestead just as the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky. Rose gasped at the sight that unfolded before her. A sturdy cabin nestled against the backdrop of towering mountains, a small creek running alongside, and pastureland that stretched toward a forested area. It wasn't grand by Eastern standards, but it held a rugged beauty that instantly spoke to Rose's soul. It's wonderful, she breathed. Jack smiled, the first full smile she'd seen from him, transforming his serious features. Henry had an eye for land. This valley catches water from the mountains, stays green when other places dry up. He dismounted and offered a hand to help her down. Come on. Let's get you inside before full daylight. The cabin was simple but well built, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, and basic furnishings. A separate sleeping area was curtained off, and shelves held books more than Rose would have expected on a frontier homestead. He said you loved reading, Jack explained, noting her surprise at the small library. Had those brought in special from Denver? Rose ran her fingers along the spines, touched by her uncle's thoughtfulness. He built all this himself, had help with the roof and some of the heavier work, but mostly yes. Jack was lighting a fire in the hearth, his movements efficient. There's a root cellar out back with preserves. Should be enough to keep us going for a few days while we figure things out. Us? Rose questioned. You're staying. Jack straightened, brushing off his hands. You think I'd break you out of jail only to leave you unprotected? Sheriff Wilkins won't give up easily. Once they realize where you've gone, they'll come. The reality of her situation hit Rose anew. I've dragged you into my troubles. You could be arrested or worse. Jack shook his head. My choice, Miss Reynolds. Besides, I've had my share of run-ins with Wilkins and his type before. Please call me Rose, she insisted, suddenly aware of how formal Miss Reynolds sounded after all they'd been through. Rose, he repeated, the name sounding different in his low, resonant voice. Jack insisted Rose rest after their night journey, and despite her protests that she wasn't tired, exhaustion soon claimed her. She awoke mid-afternoon to find the cabin empty but heard activity outside. Following the sounds, she discovered Jack chopping wood, his shirt discarded in the summer heat. Rose paused in the doorway, momentarily transfixed by the play of muscles across his back and shoulders as he swung the axe with practiced precision. The man was built like the frontier itself, strong, unyielding, shaped by hard work and open skies. Sensing her presence, Jack turned and Rose quickly averted her gaze, embarrassed to be caught staring. "I thought I'd make myself useful," she explained hurriedly. "Is there water for washing up?" "Pumps around back," Jack replied, seemingly unaware of her discomfort. "I've been checking the property boundaries. No signs anyone's been here since your uncle passed, but we should be prepared." While Jack continued his work, Rose explored her new home, finding it both strange and wonderful that this place was now hers. The garden, though somewhat overgrown, still produced vegetables. Chickens scratched in a small pen. It was a working homestead, not just a piece of land. That evening they shared a simple meal of beans, jerky, and biscuits that Jack prepared with surprising skill. "Where did you learn to cook?" Rose asked. "Trail drives. Cowboys who can cook are worth their weight in gold." Jack's eyes crinkled with humor. "Though I'll admit my repertoire is limited." "Perhaps we can expand it," Rose suggested. "I'm a fair cook myself, though Boston kitchens are rather different from this." "I imagine so." Jack studied her across the table. "You're adapting well to all this. Most Eastern ladies would be falling apart by now." Rose smiled wryly. "I'm not most Eastern ladies. My father was a doctor who believed in practical education. He taught me to ride, to shoot, to think for myself, all to my mother's horror. When he died, leaving nothing but debts, I supported myself teaching school rather than pursuing a suitable marriage as mother wished. She must not have approved of you coming west. She died last winter. There was nothing keeping me in Boston when Uncle Henry's letter arrived." Rose paused, contemplating the strange turns her life had taken. "What about you, Jack? What's your story?" Jack was quiet for a moment, as though deciding how much to share. "Born in Missouri. Father had a small ranch until the war took him. Headed west after that, worked cattle drives, did some scouting for the army. His eyes held shadows of experiences untold. Ended up in Colorado 5 years back. Like the mountains, they don't change their nature to suit anyone's purposes." "And now you're harboring a fugitive," Rose added softly. "An innocent woman," Jack corrected. "There's a difference." They fell into a companionable routine over the next few days. Rose tackled the garden and house, while Jack repaired fences and tended to other maintenance that had been neglected since her uncle's passing. They worked well together, with an easy rhythm that belied their short acquaintance. On the 4th morning, Rose was gathering eggs when she heard Jack's warning whistle from the edge of the property. She quickly retreated to the cabin, her heart pounding as she retrieved the shotgun Jack had shown her how to use. Jack appeared moments later, expression grave. "Riders coming." 3 of them. Sheriff's not with them, but I recognize one of Wilkins' deputies. "What do we do?" Rose asked, surprised at how steady her voice remained despite her fear. "We stand our ground. This is your property, legally deeded to you. They have no right to be here without a warrant." Jack checked his revolver. "Stay inside. Let me do the talking." Rose shook her head firmly. "No, this is my fight too. We face them together." Jack looked like he wanted to argue, but instead nodded tersely. "Stay on the porch then, and keep that shotgun visible but pointed down." The riders approached cautiously, clearly surprised to find the property occupied. Deputy Collins, a thin man with a perpetually sour expression, reined in his horse first. "Well, well, Jackson Yates, heard you might be mixed up in this." His gaze shifted to Rose. "And the jailbreaker herself." "You're in a heap of trouble, miss." "This is my property, legally inherited from my uncle," Rose replied evenly. "I have the deed and will to prove it. You are trespassing." Collins sneered. "That's not how Sheriff Wilkins sees it. You're wanted for escaping lawful custody, and Yates here is wanted for aiding and abetting." "There was nothing lawful about that custody," Jack countered, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Miss Reynolds was detained without charge or evidence." One of the other men, younger and clearly nervous, shifted in his saddle. We've got orders to bring you both back to Georgetown. 3 men against a woman and a cowboy. Jack's voice carried dangerous amusement. Those must be important orders. The railroad's offering a nice reward, Collins admitted with a greedy smile. Seems they're very interested in this particular piece of land. I'm not selling, Rose stated firmly. Not to the railroad or anyone else. Collins's expression hardened. Don't reckon you'll have much choice from a jail cell. Now put down those weapons and come peaceful-like. Not happening, Jack said quietly. You boys ride back to Georgetown and tell Sheriff Wilkins if he wants to press this, he'll need to come himself with proper papers. Until then, you're trespassing on private property. The standoff stretched taut as wire. Rose could feel sweat trickling down her back despite the cool morning air. She kept the shotgun steady, praying she wouldn't need to use it. Collins finally spat onto the ground. This ain't over, Yates. Not by a long shot. He wheeled his horse around. Sheriff won't be happy, and neither will Mr. Hollister. As the men rode away, Rose turned to Jack. Who's Hollister, railroad man? The one pulling Wilkins's strings. Jack's expression was grim. This complicates things. They know we're here now. They'll be back and with more men next time. What can we do? Jack was quiet for a long moment, his eyes scanning the horizon as though solutions might be written there. We need allies and evidence of what they're doing. If we can prove corruption, we might have a chance. Who would help us against the sheriff and the railroad? Rose asked, the hopelessness of their situation beginning to set in. I know some people, Jack said with determination. Good people who are tired of Hollister and his methods. But first, we need to secure this place better. They gave up too easily today. They spent the afternoon reinforcing the cabin, boarding up windows and creating defensive positions. As they worked, Rose couldn't help noticing the easy way Jack moved, the confidence in his hands as they shaped wood and metal to his purpose. There was something compelling about a man so capable, so certain of his abilities. You've done this before, she observed as he set up a clever alarm system using cans and wire around the perimeter. Jack's expression darkened momentarily. Apache raid in '67. Lost some good men because we weren't prepared. You fought Indians, Rose asked, curiosity piqued. Fought alongside them more often, Jack corrected. Scouted with a mixed company, learned a lot from them. He secured another length of wire. Most conflicts out here aren't what Eastern papers make them out to be. Usually it's about land, water rights, broken promises. Like my situation with the railroad, Rose realized. Exactly. The strong taking from those they perceive as weak. Jack stood, dusting off his hands. Only difference is you've got something they didn't expect. What's that? His blue eyes met hers steadily. Someone willing to fight alongside you. That night, after a tense day of preparations, they sat by the fire, both aware that their brief, peaceful interlude was ending. Jack cleaned his revolver with methodical care while Rose darned a tear in one of her uncle's old shirts that she'd claimed for work around the homestead. Tomorrow I'll ride to Silver Creek, Jack announced. There's a lawyer there named Ellison who's not afraid of the railroad. And the newspaper editor, Franklin, has been documenting Hollister's tactics. Rose looked up from her mending. I should come with you. Too dangerous. Collins and his men will be watching the roads. And leaving me alone here is safer, Rose countered. Besides, this is my fight. I should be the one to speak with these men. Jack considered her argument, clearly torn between protection and respect for her determination. It's a hard ride, 8 hours round trip if we push it. I can manage. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackling fire and the rhythmic cleaning of Jack's gun. Finally, he nodded. We'll leave at first light, pack light, dress practical. Rose smiled triumphantly. I'll be ready. True to her word, Rose was dressed and ready before dawn, wearing a split riding skirt she'd hastily altered from one of her simpler dresses. Jack raised an eyebrow appreciatively at her practicality, but said nothing as they saddled the horses and set out in the gray pre-dawn light. They took a roundabout route, avoiding the main trail where they might be seen. Jack led them through narrow passes and hidden valleys, clearly familiar with every inch of the surrounding country. As they rode, he pointed out landmarks and signs of wildlife, teaching Rose to read the land as they traveled. "There's beauty here I never imagined," Rose admitted as they crested a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of wilderness. Morning light gilded the mountains, and far below, a river wound like a silver ribbon through the landscape. "It gets in your blood," Jack agreed. "First time I saw the Rockies, knew I'd never be happy anywhere else. I think I understand that feeling already." Rose's eyes sparkled with newfound passion for this wild country. "Despite everything, I don't regret coming west." Jack glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "You're not what I expected, Rose Reynolds." "Is that a compliment, Mr. Yates?" The hint of a smile touched his lips. "Decidedly so." They reached Silver Creek by midday, a town smaller than Georgetown but with a busier, more prosperous feel. Jack led them directly to a modest building with Ellison and Sons, attorneys painted on the window. Edmund Ellison proved to be a shrewd man in his 50s, with spectacles and a no-nonsense demeanor that Rose immediately appreciated. After hearing their story, he didn't waste time on platitudes. "Hollister's tactics are becoming increasingly bold," he confirmed, shuffling through papers on his desk. "I've documented cases of intimidation, mysterious property fires, and at least 3 instances of trumped-up charges against landowners who refuse to sell." "Can you help us fight this legally?" Rose asked. Ellison sighed. "It won't be easy. The territorial courts are influenced by railroad money, same as everything else." But his eyes gleamed with determination. "Not everyone can be bought. Judge Patterson arrives next week for circuit court. He's known for his integrity." "We may not have a week," Jack pointed out. "Wilkins and his men know where we are now." "Then we need to build public pressure," Ellison decided. "Let's visit Franklin at the newspaper. If he prints your story, it makes it harder for them to act in the shadows." The newspaper office was cramped but buzzing with activity. Thomas Franklin, a barrel-chested man with ink-stained fingers, listened intently to their account, scribbling notes with occasional exclamations of outrage. "This is precisely the story we need," he declared when they finished. "A young woman, rightful heir, imprisoned without cause to steal her inheritance. The public will be incensed. Will it make a difference?" Rose asked cautiously. "Public opinion is a powerful force, Miss Reynolds. Hollister cares about his reputation back east where the investors are. Enough bad publicity could force the railroad to distance themselves from such tactics." As they prepared to leave, Franklin handed Rose a stack of previous newspapers. "These document similar cases. Take them, they might help convince Judge Patterson of the pattern." Their next stop was the telegraph office, where Jack sent messages to several names he wouldn't explain to Rose. "Calling in some favors," was all he would say. By late afternoon, they were ready to return to the homestead. As they mounted their horses, Jack turned to Rose with unexpected intensity. "Whatever happens, I want you to know I believe we can win this. Your uncle didn't back down, and neither will we." Rose felt a surge of emotion at his words: gratitude, admiration, and something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. "Thank you, Jack, for everything." They were halfway home when Jack suddenly raised his hand in warning, bringing them to a halt. His eyes scanned the rocky terrain ahead, body tense with alertness. "What is it?" Rose whispered. Not sure. Something's not right. He dismounted silently, motioning for Rose to do the same. Taking the reins of both horses, he led them off the trail into a dense stand of pines. They'd barely concealed themselves when Rose heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. Moments later, 6 riders appeared on the trail they'd just vacated, moving at a determined pace toward Silver Creek. Rose recognized Collins among them. "They're following us," she breathed. Jack nodded grimly. "Must have spotted us leaving this morning, split up to cover the different routes. What do we do now? They'll be watching for us on the return journey." Jack considered their options, his expression calculating. "We wait until dark, then take the high pass. It's treacherous at night, but they won't expect that route." The delay meant hours of waiting, concealed in their improvised hiding place. As dusk fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and Rose found herself shivering despite her warm clothing. Without a word, Jack moved closer, offering his body heat as they huddled against a fallen log. "Tell me about Boston," he said quietly, clearly trying to distract her from their predicament. Rose smiled in the gathering darkness. "It's nothing like this. Crowded, proper, everything arranged just so. The right families, the right schools, the right conversation topics. Sounds stifling. It was in many ways, but there was culture too: music, art, literature. I taught at a girls' academy, trying to instill some independence in young ladies destined for marriage markets." "Were you successful?" Rose laughed softly. "With a few. The truly bright ones recognize the cage, even if gilded. And you? No suitors trying to claim the spirited schoolteacher?" The question carried a hint of something personal, and Rose found herself answering more honestly than she might have with someone else. "There was one man, a colleague's brother, Richard. He was kind, educated, stable. Mother thought him perfect." She sighed, remembering. "But when he spoke of our future, it was all about his life, his career, his needs. I would simply fit into the spaces left over." Jack was quiet for a moment. Some men can't see past their own ambitions to recognize what's standing before them. Their eyes met in the dim light, and Rose felt a flicker of connection that had been building since that first moment in the jailhouse. Here was a man who saw her, truly saw her strength and vulnerability alike. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities, until Jack finally broke the silence. "It's dark enough now. We should move." True to Jack's warning, the high pass proved treacherous in the darkness. The narrow trail clung to the mountainside, with a sheer drop to one side that Rose tried not to contemplate. Jack led the way, occasionally reaching back to guide her horse through particularly difficult sections. "Almost through," he encouraged as they navigated a hairpin turn. "See those stars ahead? That's where the pass opens up." They emerged onto more level ground just as the moon rose, casting silver light across the landscape. Below them lay the valley where Rose's homestead nestled. "Home," she murmured, the word feeling strange and right simultaneously. Jack smiled, the moonlight catching the lines around his eyes. "Let's get you there safely." They approached the cabin with caution, but all appeared undisturbed. The alarm system they'd rigged remained intact, and no tracks suggested visitors in their absence. Nevertheless, Jack insisted on checking the perimeter before allowing Rose inside. "All clear," he confirmed, finally relaxing slightly as they settled in the cabin. "But they'll be back, especially when they discover we've been to Silver Creek." "At least we've made progress," Rose pointed out, lighting the lamp. "We have Ellison working on legal protection, and Franklin will publish our story." "It's a start," Jack agreed, though concern still lined his face. "But Hollister won't give up easily. Men like him are used to getting what they want." As they shared a late meal, Rose studied Jack's weathered face, seeing the fatigue etched there despite his attempts to hide it. "You should rest," she urged. "You've barely slept since we met." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Are you worried about me, Rose Reynolds?" "Someone should be," she replied softly. "You're so busy protecting everyone else." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between them, acknowledgement of feelings growing too strong to ignore. Jack looked away first, clearing his throat. "Dawn comes early. We both need rest." That night, Rose lay awake in her uncle's bed, listening to Jack's quiet movements as he checked doors and windows one final time before settling on the pallet he'd made near the fireplace. Their situation was precarious, dangerous, yet she couldn't remember ever feeling so alive, so purposeful. And if her thoughts continually returned to the quiet strength in Jack's hands, the steadiness of his gaze, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. Well, that was a complication she would examine another time. Morning arrived with a sense of foreboding that proved warranted when Jack spotted dust on the horizon, riders approaching, more than before. Rose counted 8 men through her uncle's old spyglass. "Sheriff's with them this time," Jack noted grimly. "And that man in the fancy coat must be Hollister himself." "They've brought quite a force for 2 people," Rose observed, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. Jack checked his weapons one last time. "Means they're worried." "That's good. Worried men make mistakes." The riders stopped at the property line, clearly wary of ambush after their previous encounter. Sheriff Wilkins rode forward alone, stopping within shouting distance of the cabin. "Yates, Reynolds, this has gone far enough," he called. "Come out peacefully and no one gets hurt." Jack and Rose exchanged glances, then stepped onto the porch together, both armed, Jack with his revolver, Rose with the shotgun. "What's your business, Sheriff?" Jack called back. "This is private property." "You're both wanted fugitives," Wilkins replied. "And I have a warrant for your arrest signed by Judge Miller in Georgetown." "Judge Miller is in the railroad's pocket," Rose responded loudly. "And we have evidence of corruption involving you, the judge, and Mr. Hollister there." At the mention of evidence, she saw Hollister lean forward in his saddle, speaking urgently to Wilkins. The sheriff's face darkened with anger. "You're bluffing," he shouted. "Hand yourselves over now or we'll take you by force." "You won't find that easy," Jack warned. "And killing us would be a mistake. Those documents we mentioned, already safely delivered to people who know what to do with them if anything happens to us." This was a bluff, but a calculated one. The newspaper editions and Ellison's files contained damning information, even if not specifically about Rose's case. Hollister finally rode forward to join the sheriff, his expensive clothes and manicured appearance marking him as different from the rough men accompanying him. "Miss Reynolds," he called, voice oily with false charm, "there's no need for unpleasantness. I'm prepared to offer you a generous sum for this property, twice its market value." "This land is not for sale, Mr. Hollister," Rose replied firmly. "Not at any price." "Every person has a price," Hollister countered, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Name yours." "My uncle refused to sell to you, and so do I." Rose stood straighter, emboldened by Jack's solid presence beside her. "He saw value in this land beyond money. It's his legacy, and I intend to honor it." Hollister's facade of civility cracked slightly. "You're making a grave mistake, young lady. The railroad is coming through this valley one way or another." "Not through this property," Jack interjected, "and not through intimidation and corruption." The standoff stretched tense and dangerous until Sheriff Wilkins finally spat on the ground. "You've got until sundown to reconsider. After that, we're coming in. Warrant gives us authority." As the men retreated to confer among themselves at a distance, Jack turned to Rose. They're trying to intimidate us, but that warrant makes this more complicated. Even a corrupt judge's orders carry weight in the territory. What options do we have? Jack's expression was grim but determined. We hold out until help arrives. Help? What help? Rose asked, confused. Those telegrams I sent from Silver Creek. Called in some favors from people who owe me and some who simply hate Hollister's methods as much as we do. Hope flickered in Rose's chest. Will they come in time? We just need to hold out until tomorrow, Jack said. Think we can manage that? Rose nodded, feeling a fierce determination replace her fear. Together? Yes. They spent the day fortifying their position further, moving water and supplies into the root cellar which could serve as a fallback position if necessary. Jack showed Rose defensive angles and blind spots around the property, planning their strategy with the precision of someone who had faced battle before. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, they shared a simple meal that might be their last moment of peace for some time. Jack, Rose said quietly, if this goes badly, it won't, he interrupted firmly. But if it does, she persisted, I want you to know these have been the most extraordinary days of my life. Not just the danger, but everything, this place, working alongside you. Jack's eyes softened as they met hers across the table. Rose, a sharp crack from outside, interrupted whatever he had been about to say. They both jumped to their feet, grabbing weapons. They're early, Jack muttered, peering carefully out the window, moving into position around the perimeter. Rose's heart hammered in her chest, but her hands remained steady on the shotgun. So it begins. Sheriff Wilkins's voice boomed across the yard. Final chance, Yates. Send the woman out and maybe we can work something out for you. Jack's jaw tightened. He's trying to divide us. He doesn't know us very well then, Rose replied with fierce loyalty. When no response came from the cabin, gunfire erupted from the tree line. Bullets splintered wood around the windows and thudded into the thick logs of the cabin walls. Stay low, Jack instructed, returning fire carefully through a narrow opening. They're wasting ammunition, trying to scare us into surrender. Rose positioned herself at another window, watching for movement as Jack had taught her. When she spotted a man rushing from one tree to another, she fired the shotgun, not aiming to hit but to force him back to cover. Good, Jack approved. Make them cautious. The exchange of gunfire continued sporadically as darkness fell. Hollister's men seemed content to keep them pinned down rather than risk a direct assault on the cabin's strong walls. As night deepened, they lit lanterns, creating a perimeter of light that would make it difficult for Jack and Rose to escape unseen. They're settling in for a siege, Jack observed grimly. Cutting off escape routes. How long before your help arrives? Rose whispered. Should be here by mid-morning if nothing delays them. Jack checked their ammunition, frowning slightly at their dwindling supplies. We need to conserve shots, make every one count. Throughout the night, they took turns watching and resting, though sleep came fitfully for Rose. The weight of their situation pressed heavily upon her, not just her own fate, but Jack's as well. He had risked everything for her. A woman he barely knew, out of principle and loyalty to her uncle's memory. Dawn brought renewed attempts by Wilkins to negotiate their surrender, each offer more threatening than the last. By mid-morning, Rose's nerves were stretched thin from the constant tension, and still no sign of Jack's promised reinforcements. Something must have delayed them, Jack muttered, scanning the horizon for any sign of approaching riders. How much longer can we hold out? Rose asked, trying to mask her exhaustion. Jack's honest eyes met hers. Ammunition's running low. They haven't pressed hard yet, but they will. As if hearing his assessment, a new volley of gunfire erupted from multiple positions, more concentrated than before. Jack returned fire sparingly, each shot precisely placed to drive back their attackers. "They're getting bolder," he observed as a bullet shattered what remained of the window beside him, showering glass across the floor. Rose felt fear clawing at her throat but pushed it down resolutely. "We've come too far to surrender now." A sudden crash against the back door startled them. Both someone was attempting to break in while they were distracted by the frontal assault. Jack moved quickly to reinforce the barricaded entrance, and Rose covered him, firing toward the sound. The attack at the rear subsided, but the damage was done. Their defensive position was weakening, and Wilkins's men knew it. The sheriff's voice called out again, closer than before. "You're out of options, Yates. Send Reynolds out now and you walk away free and clear. Hollister's willing to forget your involvement." Jack's response was a well-placed shot that sent the sheriff scrambling for cover. "Never was much for negotiating," he remarked to Rose with a grim smile. The intensity of gunfire increased again, pinning them down more effectively. Rose could see Jack calculating their remaining ammunition, the strain of their situation evident in the tightness around his eyes despite his outward calm. "Jack," she said quietly, "they want me, not you. Perhaps if—" "Don't even suggest it," he cut her off, his voice hard. "We stand together. I won't let them take what's rightfully yours." "It's just land," she argued. Jack turned to her fully then, his expression intense. "It's not just about the land anymore, Rose. Surely you know that." The raw emotion in his voice silenced her. In the midst of gunfire and danger, something far more powerful than property rights hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. A new sound cut through the chaos: hoof beats, many of them, approaching fast from the east. Jack moved to the window, cautious hope lighting his features. "Riders coming. At least 20. His smile broke through like sunrise. "And that's Benjamin Wade leading them." "Who?" Rose asked, peering past him at the dust cloud approaching rapidly. "Territorial Marshal. And those men with him, ranchers, shopkeepers, miners, people Hollister's steamrolled over the years." Jack's voice carried triumph. "Our reinforcements have arrived." The reaction from Wilkins and Hollister's men was immediate confusion, followed by hasty regrouping. The gunfire directed at the cabin ceased as they turned to face this new threat. Marshal Wade's voice boomed across the property. "Sheriff Wilkins, by the authority of the territorial court, you and your men are ordered to stand down immediately." Rose watched in amazement as the tables turned dramatically. Wade's force outnumbered Wilkins's men more than 2-1, and they quickly surrounded the sheriff's position. Most of Hollister's hired guns, seeing the odds shift, threw down their weapons without resistance. Hollister himself tried to flee but was cut off by 2 riders who had circled behind the property. Sheriff Wilkins, realizing his precarious position, reluctantly surrendered his weapon to Marshal Wade. Jack finally relaxed his vigilant stance, turning to Rose with relief and triumph mingled in his expression. "It's over." Tears of relief sprang unexpectedly to Rose's eyes. "We did it." "We did it," Jack confirmed, his own voice rough with emotion. He hesitated, then stepped closer, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were magnificent, braver than anyone I've ever known." Rose looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they stood, how the danger they'd shared had forged something profound between them. "We make a good team." "The best," he agreed softly. His eyes searched hers, asking a silent question. When she gave an almost imperceptible nod, he lowered his head slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with all the emotion they'd held in check during their ordeal. Rose felt herself melting against him, her hands finding their way to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist, pulling her closer. The sound of boots on the porch steps finally broke them apart. Jack stepped back reluctantly, his eyes still holding hers with a promise that this conversation wasn't finished. Marshal Wade entered without knocking, his weathered face breaking into a grin at the sight of Jack. "Yates, you old troublemaker, always finding the biggest hornet's nest to kick." Jack clasped the marshal's outstretched hand. "Appreciate the timely arrival, Ben. Got your telegram. Then Franklin's newspaper reached me with quite a story." Wade turned to Rose, tipping his hat respectfully. "Miss Reynolds, I presume. You've caused quite a stir in these parts." "It wasn't my intention," Rose replied with dignity. "I merely came to claim what was legally mine, and stumbled into Hollister's grand plans for the railroad." Wade nodded, understanding. "Well, his schemes have finally caught up with him. We've been building a case against him for months. Your situation was the final piece we needed." "What happens now?" Jack asked. "Wilkins will be removed as sheriff pending investigation. Hollister's facing multiple charges of corruption, intimidation, and conspiracy." Wade's expression grew serious. "But his partners back east still have influence. This fight isn't completely over." "But Rose's land," Jack pressed, "is hers legally and rightfully. I've brought Judge Patterson's written confirmation of that fact." Wade produced an official-looking document from his coat. "No one can contest your ownership now, Miss Reynolds." Rose accepted the paper with trembling hands. "Thank you, Marshal. Thank Yates here. He's been feeding me information on Hollister for months." Wade clapped Jack on the shoulder. "Always knew that conscience of yours would get you in trouble eventually." After Wade left to supervise the removal of their prisoners, Rose turned to Jack with newfound understanding. "You were already fighting Hollister before we met." Jack nodded, somewhat self-consciously. "Your uncle and I both. He refused to sell despite pressure. I gathered evidence of Hollister's methods. Then breaking me out of jail was the right thing to do," Jack finished simply. "Though I didn't expect." He trailed off, his eyes meeting hers with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "Didn't expect what?" Rose prompted softly, stepping closer to him. Jack reached out, his calloused fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. "Didn't expect you, Rose Reynolds. Didn't expect to find someone who fights with such spirit, who faces danger without flinching, who makes me think of possibilities I'd long since given up on." Rose caught his hand in hers, her heart racing. "What possibilities? A home, a future." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "Someone to build that future with." "Are you proposing, Mr. Yates?" Rose asked, a smile playing at her lips despite her attempt at seriousness. "Too soon for that," Jack replied, though his eyes suggested otherwise. "But I am asking to court you properly once the dust settles. To see where this leads us." Rose pretended to consider, though her heart had already decided. "I suppose I could use a partner to help with this homestead, someone who knows the land, who's handy with repairs, just for my practical skills." Jack asked, drawing her closer, his arms encircling her waist. Rose's smile widened. "Those among other qualities, such as your unwavering sense of justice, your loyalty." She reached up to touch his face. "The way you look at me like I'm something precious and strong at the same time." Jack's expression softened. "Because you are." Their second kiss was deeper than the first, unhurried now that danger had passed, full of promise and discovery. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "So, Miss Reynolds, what will you do with your rightfully claimed property?" "Build something worthy of my uncle's legacy," she answered without hesitation. "And perhaps worthy of our future, too." Over the following months, Rose's homestead transformed under their combined efforts. Jack officially moved his belongings from his small rented room in Silver Creek. though propriety was maintained with him occupying the small bunkhouse until, as he put it with a wink, arrangements became more permanent. The legal aftermath of Hollister's downfall played out largely as Marshal Wade had predicted. Sheriff Wilkins was removed from office and ultimately convicted of corruption. Hollister faced more serious charges but used his connections to secure a reduced sentence. Most importantly for Rose and Jack, the railroad was forced to alter its planned route, bypassing her property entirely. The publicity surrounding the case made it impossible for the company to continue its strong-arm tactics in the territory, at least for the time being. By autumn, the homestead boasted a thriving expanded garden, additional chickens, and a small herd of cattle that Jack had acquired through trading his expertise to neighboring ranchers. Rose, putting her education to use, began teaching the children from nearby homesteads 3 days a week in the front room of the cabin. As the first snow dusted the mountains, Jack finally made good on his promise of formal courtship, though Rose teased him that facing down armed men together had rather accelerated the normal getting-acquainted process. On Christmas Eve, with the cabin warm and festive with pine boughs and candles, Jack knelt before Rose with a simple gold ring that had belonged to his mother. "Rose Reynolds, I've loved you since you stood defiant in that cell, refusing to be broken by injustice. Will you build the rest of your life with me as my wife and partner in all things?" Rose, tears shining in her eyes, pulled him to his feet. "Jackson Yates, you broke the bars that imprisoned me, not just the iron ones, but the invisible ones I'd carried from the East." How could my answer be anything but yes? They married in the spring of 1875, with Marshal Wade standing as Jack's best man and Edmund Ellison giving the bride away. The ceremony took place on the homestead, beneath the spreading branches of an old oak tree that Henry Reynolds had cherished. Their union proved as strong and enduring as the mountains that surrounded their home. In time, they expanded the cabin to accommodate their growing family, first a son, Henry, named for the uncle whose legacy had brought them together. Then twin daughters, Sarah and Margaret, who inherited their mother's spirit and their father's steady determination. As decades passed, Georgetown and the surrounding region changed dramatically. The silver boom eventually faded, the railroad extended its reach, though never through Reynolds land, and Colorado achieved statehood. Through it all, the Yates homestead remained a beacon of the values Jack and Rose held dear: justice, perseverance, and the courage to stand against power when necessary. In 1899, as the new century approached, a journalist from Denver visited to interview them for a series on pioneer families. Finding them still vital though gray-haired, still working the land they loved, he asked the secret to their enduring partnership. Rose, her green eyes still bright with the fire that had captivated Jack 25 years earlier, exchanged a smile with her husband before answering. "When we met, I was locked in a sheriff's cell without cause," she explained. "This stubborn cowboy looked at those iron bars and simply said, 'Then I'll break the bars.' That's been our approach to every challenge since Face It Together, refuse to accept injustice and find a way through." Jack, his arm around her shoulders, added quietly, "Some treasures are worth fighting for. I found mine when I wasn't even looking." The homestead passed to their children and grandchildren, who maintained the traditions of independence and integrity their parents had established. And in family gatherings for generations afterward, the story was told and retold of a brave young woman from Boston, a principled cowboy who couldn't stand injustice, and the love that bloomed when he broke the bars that imprisoned her, setting them both free to build a life neither could have imagined alone.